Dr. Jordan B. Peterson has underscored the critical importance of increasing the probability that criminals face consequences for their actions rather than relying solely on harsher sentencing. In a recent discussion, Peterson argued that treating offenders as victims undermines the effectiveness of the justice system and threatens societal order.
So let's talk a bit left for a second, because you have Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, who continues to overcharge people like Daniel Penny, who thankfully was acquitted, while undercharging, not charging at all, or letting violent criminals out of jail so they can then go victimize others. But then they say this on Twitter and elsewhere in other media. They say things like, this is from Bragg, New Yorkers rely on public transportation and our transit system, and they should be safe. It should be a safe environment for all Manhattanites. This year, we've continued to prosecute those who jeopardize the safety of its commuters, riders, and workers. So after there's consequences for their policies, they then turn around and say that they're doing everything they can to keep people safe, when it's clearly not true.
That seems to me to be perfectly reasonable. That's what happens when you treat criminals like they're victims. Now, the right tends to call for longer jail sentences, and that's not necessarily effective, but probability of being caught is very effective. Criminals are rational actors by and large, and they take risk into effect, as we've seen in California with the waves of shoplifting emerging after the California government so foolishly decided that any shoplifting under $1,000 wouldn't be prosecuted. Well, anybody with a criminal bent is going to feel that's a field day. So the best thing that governments could do is increase the probability that criminals will actually suffer the consequences of their actions and stop treating them as if they're victims. The victim idea with regards to criminality is unbelievably naive. Most, especially repeat offenders. So it's 1% of criminals commit 65% of the crime. And it's been known among people who understand penological theory for decades that the best thing you can do with a repeat offender is to lock them up essentially until they're in their late 20s, when they often more or less mature out of their criminality. But to feel sorry, you're just a fool.
Peterson pointed out that many criminals are rational actors who calculate risks before committing crimes. He cited California's policy of not prosecuting thefts under $1,000 as an example of how leniency can embolden criminal behavior, leading to widespread shoplifting. The best thing that governments could do is increase the probability that criminals will actually suffer the consequences of their actions and stop treating them as if they're victims, Peterson said. The psychologist also highlighted long-standing criminological data showing that a small percentage of repeat offenders are responsible for the majority of crimes. He argued that detaining these individuals through their peak offending years, often into their late 20s, could significantly reduce overall crime rates. Peterson's remarks also addressed Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's policies, where cases like that of Daniel Penny have drawn national attention. Critics argue that Bragg prioritizes prosecuting individuals acting in self-defense while showing leniency toward repeat offenders. Peterson dismissed the notion of viewing criminals primarily as victims, calling it unbelievably naive. He emphasized that while compassion has its place, it must not come at the expense of public safety and justice. To feel sorry, you're just a fool, Peterson stated bluntly. The discussion echoes ongoing debates about progressive prosecutorial policies and their unintended consequences, with Peterson advocating for a justice system focused on certainty of punishment rather than severity alone.